We are here, three of us, to take forward the discussion on manufacturing. As you all may be aware, that manufacturing and within manufacturing, I think there are certain sectors like steel, cement, and other mineral-based industry, which are the core industry, and I think a lot of services and lot of ancillary industries are actually dependent upon the performance of the manufacturing sector, because that's the, I think, the heart of the Indian economy, and I think a great multiplier of the GDP. Uh, Considering that, I think I'll just go over to Kanaya. Kanaya, as you are aware that the government of India has ambitious plans to be India to be the third largest economy, an economy of almost US dollar 5 trillion by 2027. But at the same time, I think we have not been able to attract a lot of investment in the manufacturing sector, especially with China not doing so well because of so many reasons. There has not been debate that India should be the global manufacturing hub, should take the place of China. So, what, in your view, is actually holding to India to be the global manufacturing hub? So, some of the like issues which comes to my mind, and you can elaborate on that. That one is that the enforcement of contracts in India has improved quite a bit, with also with the amendment in the Arbitration Act, where you have a lot of changes has happened in the Arbitration Act, which actually helps in dispute resolution. And now the mediation bill has also been approved. There are issues regarding land acquisition. Especially in manufacturing, you need large tracts of land, and you know how easy or difficult it is to acquire under the new Land Acquisition Act, where you require approval of 80% of the community who are staying there, and you have to do two-stage. First, you have to do the social impact assessment and then approval. And God forbid, if it is a tribal area, then it falls under the special act also. And apart from that, there are a lot of consent and approval which is required. And I'm sure you have witnessed a lot of auctions where we get the mines under auction, but it is very difficult to get the surface rights. So, if you can just highlight that, what are the challenges which you are facing, and how those challenges, what the government of India can do to really take India to the next level of manufacturing, that will be a great. So, what do you, Kanai?
Well, Rajiv, when we talk about manufacturing sector, I would like to elaborate the entire regime in 5 points. One is, as rightly mentioned, land acquisition, labor reforms, and minerals and hello, yeah. So mining industry, and that's auction now. Auction regime. We are into auction regime now. And last but not least is a judiciary reform in a country, whether it is a court judiciary system, the speed and quality and consistency vis-a-vis arbitration in a private, specifically private contract enforcement. Now, this 5 point, if you elaborate, that covers entire manufacturing. Yeah. Yeah. So that covers entire manufacturing sector and trend and challenges and opportunities, whatever you may term it. So point number one, land reforms. Yes, we have land reforms 2013 Act, but despite that, in a public project acquisitions, 80% consent, but still 20% are well enough to create the nuisance value, even in case of public project as well. So I would recommend the government to have a nodal agency concept like in other countries, so that till the time entire land acquired, there should not be any dispute, or once it is acquired, no subsequent dispute on the land by individual landowners, because it's a public project acquisitions, like we have in the Coal Bearing Act and all kind of concept. compensations, I fully agree that if required to pay extra compensations, pay it, but don't invite in dispute because X amount of compensations has a nuisance value of X plus 100 times compensations to industry once the land is acquired. So land acquisition, some monitoring, some nodal agency concept is required to complete the project and acquisitions time, point number one. Point number two, land reforms. I must say that government has done a good job. In earlier regime, personages is well aware about that concept of 100 labor laws. And now today we have the one labor code. But unfortunately, still even today, I have not seen the implementation ray of the law. So that required to ensure that more and more for speedy enforcement of that single labor code. Is there an almost one point, we all talk about concern for the contract labor, worker, job opportunity. We are talking a lot about that, but what actually solution required, Rajiv, here is we require to give a job opportunity to worker directly. We don't require contract labor concept anymore in the country because we have not a good example of hiring labor through contractor because contractors charge 30-40% commissions in it. They don't play the very fair role as well. Instead of that, if law allows you to hire the temporary worker on a contract basis directly in your payroll, it has twofold benefit. 30-40% commission which I'm going to contractor will directly, more amount can be payable directly to worker, even there's a temporary, so that they'll get a job opportunity. Today what's happening, because of not hiring contract temporary labor direct in my payroll, they're not getting job opportunity also sometimes. So I'm scared to hire the job, hire to those contract temporarily. So temporary contract labor hiring in my payroll should be allowed. That will create a job opportunity. That will pay more to them directly. That's a land reforms required. And then you talked about, I believe, auction. Of course, auction regime has recently come up last 3-4 years. You and me have handled many auctions together, in fact. And you've seen that how loser party creating a nuisance value in auction, technical glitch, this problem, that problem, and getting the stay order from the court. And the entire auction get disturbed over a period of 4 to 5 years. So to avoid that, there can be infrastructure special court, I would suggest. And don't allow
In
the
fact,
interview.
on that point, if I may interject,
Yeah.
do you feel that today the model is that they are putting the mineral auction into the mineral block into auction, where people are participating and there is a price discovery you get, and then you have to do further compliances in terms of first getting the land and then getting the mining plan, then the EC. And the biggest block is getting the surface right, because
Correct.
surface right you have to go and negotiate with private individuals. The moment companies, the individual are aware that this company has got a block, mineral block, they start asking, prices which is more than 5 times, 6 times, 7 times. Still you may get say 80% of the land, then somebody will not be willing to sell.
Correct.
So do you feel that rather than the company going and acquiring the land, they should come up with a play and plug model where once the government identifies that this is the mineral block, they should do the land acquisition, because for the government it is much easier in the name of government projects, and there are exemptions around taking that approval and doing the social impact assessment. They acquire the land, and then they should, if they offer for auction, I think companies like, whether it is any leading corporate, whether it is into steel or cement or any other mineral, they will be willing to pay a much higher premium, because they are sure that once they get the mineral block, they can immediately take the statutory approval and start the mining. If you see the data, out of more than 50% of the mineral blocks, out of the 108 mineral blocks which has been auctioned, as per a report of Economic Times, 50% has been annulled, either due to lack of bidding participation or not getting the minimum number of bidders. So, if you can throw some light, like whether this model will be, this is what I think the government of India should think.
So let me diagnose the root cause problem of not participation in auction specifically. As you rightly mentioned, 110 blocks are in, completely 50% blocks are not being participated by bidders. One of the reason, Yeah, that is one. But apart from the land acquisitions problem, high premium of minerals like iron and ore in industry is one of the also reason high premium participation because commercial viability. There are 4 points issue here. One is before they start the auction, they need to see that in absence of adequate geocycle data, they are unable to value that auctions properly. Then they talked about ASP price, average sales price. At the same time, they talk about National Mineral Index. Now, I don't know how National Mineral Index pricing model and ASP go side by side. Either they have to clear the role for both the concept clearly. Third point is about sustainability of the minerals, resources, natural resources. Because today, after acquiring the auction, if my technical expert says that, look, it has no sustainability beyond 10 years, and government thinks that is a 50 years sustainability, there's a big problem. So IBM plans system. So there is something technical research and technology is required before you price your auction, so that it should be commercially, and ASP should be linked with the market price. Otherwise, ASP will not sustain. So these are the pricing models. Some expansion exploration technical model is required, like strategic minerals, where you require to pay higher foreign exchange to import those minerals. You should have a special strategic focus on those minerals. So, and the land, as you rightly mentioned, land acquisition, whether surface right or entire land acquisition before, or ECFC before you auction. So single window clearances. So this kind of sinking the entire auction will help to increase the price and participation, because basically you require more and more natural resources at the same time. At the same time, when which you are forgetting in the previous session, the subject is ESG model. Under the heading of the ESG, we are not doing actually sustainable environmental situation. We are doing unbalancing. Without natural resources, country will not grow. At the same time, you have to balance the environment as well, environment ecosystem. So balancing is properly required with the natural resources. So, and then your public interest litigations, NGO, in between project coming without any valid reasons, they are bringing the stay orders. So last point is judicial reforms is required.
Yeah.
Arbitration or separate infrastructure court is a really
So
ideal
on that point of judicial reforms, do you feel that tribunals like NGT and sometimes even other courts have gone overboard in terms of either setting aside the environment clearances, or do you feel that because of NGT now you have a specialized tribunal where if somebody is challenging your clearance or anybody's clearance, the tribunal is better equipped not to entertain such petitions?
Let me share my thought. When there was no NGT, there was a High Court and Supreme Court. And then government thought that there should be special tribunal like NGT. Now, it's a good idea to have the NGT. But then, under the heading of NGT, you are to face the trial for 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, 5 year. And that order has been challenged Supreme Court. And Supreme Court requires 4 or 5 years for NGT orders. The entire purpose of having special tribunal like NGT or CLAT or NCLT get frustrated if the higher judiciary is taking more than reasonable time. The whole purpose of judiciary system and required reforms is not you come out of the 100 laws and system. You require enforceability, speedy judicial system in the country today if you really want to invite the foreign investment. We are talking about foreign investment. I think when I start my career, there are very restricted foreign investment regime. Today, government has come out of the entire, almost 90-80% products are freely available, foreign direct available. But despite of that, if you are not getting foreign investment, it's not because of free economy regime, but because of your judiciary system, because of timeline, quality, consistent legal principles, law interpretations, enforcement. These are the areas, core areas need to address, and there's a high time. And arbitration. We come out of the arbitration amendment few years back for the timeline of 1.5 years. But that is only for arbitration. What about 34, 37? Once I have the award in my favor, other judiciaries, commercial court, high court, Supreme Court takes another 7 years. So the whole purpose of arbitration gets frustrated if you're not having timeline for high court and Supreme Court and commercial court on deciding this matter. So timeline, quality, speedy enforceability, and specialization, technical specialization to judges. These are the core areas for judicial reforms, according to me, so that even if you have the project going on, your project will not be stopped or hurdle beyond reasonable time. Today, your entire big 30 years project getting affected because of judiciary timeline. After 10 years, if I get the favorable order, what the hell I will do with that order? By then, I might spoil my business. So judiciary reforms is a must required.
if I hear you rightly, I think what you are trying to say that there will be issues in manufacturing. I think the court should have a better understanding of core manufacturing, and intervention should be done minimum wherever actually required and not in every case.
Correct. Intervention, fair intervention. I'm not saying that completely believe in corporate. You have to balance with the environment and permissions, NGO. You have to respect them. But then timeline. If you are giving relief, that relief should have some 3 months or 6 month time where you have some, either you vacate the relief or you hear the matter entirely. Otherwise, every day, if some corporate is losing 1,000 crore rupees per day, I think better we spend this money in judicial reforms. Have the many high courts and increase the judiciary numbers. So I think that's a good investment in the judiciary, which will really help infrastructure investment and invite the foreign investment today. And last but not least, consistent legal law, tax regime, or any land. You need to have some consistency in predictable law. You are bringing some law 2 years, after 3 years again amendment, after 4 years again amendment. So that gives a doubt and suspicion in the mind of foreign investments. So that needs to.
So you are basically saying that you need more certainty.
Absolutely, more certainty. Having said that, government is really trying level best to push the investment, like they have the in incentive. Now during, I think 20 years before, incentive was given to investment. Now incentive was given to the production and dispatch. That's a good move. Government is pushing you for the, more incentive for production, dispatch, land reforms. Many things are happening. But without judiciary reforms and infrastructures, all these efforts are going to frustrate and not going to serve your purpose for what you are bringing the amendment.
Thanks, Kanaya. Ankit, moving on to you, I think you also, in your earlier role, was very closely linked with mineral and mining industry, although Hindustan Zinc is, the end product is a metal. So looking at your experience, what in your opinion in terms of legal and regulatory framework what are the things which is holding back more and more investment in manufacturing? If you can be very specific, like one topic which we touched upon, which Kanaya touched upon, is like land reforms, more certainty in law, less judicial intervention. Judicial intervention is definitely required if the law is not being followed or if the law is being violated. But sometimes we all know how some of these NGOs, they are backed by some certain people, and there have been intervention, or there are committees which are being appointed and the committee gives finding, there's no hearing. So if you can highlight some of the overall in the manufacturing sector, what are the legal intervention if it's required, it will be great, and we'll take the discussion forward. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, sir. So in a manufacturing setup, the most important thing is, first thing is money. So the cost of borrowing is one of the critical factors which impact a decision in setting up a large-scale manufacturing organization within any setup. Now, cost of borrowing is not only RBI, but also a lot of other factors which come in, including the cost of delay in projects. These factors, when factored in, often leads to an IRR which is in a range of 8 to 12%, basically a rate of return on investment. Whereas the global economy, with a 2 or 3% of average cost of borrowing, is able to deliver a 6 to 7% of IRR. So they're still double that of cost of borrowing. India, cost of borrowing versus IRR is approximately the similar number. 8 to 12% is the average, wherein the return is also in the same range until the product is very specific, or some exceptions are there, but generally the manufacturing, 8 to 12% is the manufacturing IRR. So the legal setup, how does law come into figure? all of this costs are factored in when they're borrowing money by the bankers, by the financiers, by the promoters. Debt cost is high. Equity cost is also very high. Compliance cost is very, very high. Now, when it comes down to setting up a fresh or a greenfield manufacturing, of course, Ganesh have pointed out a number of land issues being major of them. Of course, yes. State came up with a good concept of creating economic zone, creating industrial corridors, giving a grant of EC only when you have land confirmation or a land holding available. Good process. Unfortunately, delays it further. Conceptually, yes, very good. You have a clear land, only then you go with the EC. Very good. Unfortunately, getting a clear land itself is a tedious process which takes 3 years to getting a clear land. Now that 3 years is getting built up in the cost of borrowing. Because if I am projecting a cost today and it takes 2 or 3 years from a project to get set up from a PPT to a project conceptualization or a order delivery, the cost is getting inbuilt in that thing. And then vendors are considering the inbuilt cost. So this is all percolating in such a system that manufacturing per se gets, let's say, a bit lesser in attention than the service sector within India. Now, having said that, regulatory intervention in such matters may be very prudent and can help a lot of industries. For example, setting up of land banks, very simple thing, compensatory afforestation. Lot of industries would be coming up with thought processes of setting up industry, and India being having a lot of area under forest land or designated as a forest land, there has to be compensatory afforestation. A lot of time, efforts go in getting EC along with the FC clearance. FC clearance means that you need a compensatory afforestation. Getting compensatory afforestation, like a clean land for compensatory afforestation, is not the botheration of Department of Forest. It's the botheration of the private player who has absolutely zero role or in purchasing land in that capacity, right? In that huge capacity. Now, when that comes down to the figure, then the private player is expected to comply. Fine, compliance will be there.
So basically, what are you trying to say? That if I have to offer land for compensatory afforestation, that land should be readily available.
Readily available.
With the government.
Yes.
The government or the forest department can identify that if I am, say, leaving around 10 acres of forest, equivalent land I have identified, you pay the money and we will develop this as a
Yes.
forest, rather than the company running after individuals to identify that land which is fit for forest. It's not any land. It has to be a land to the satisfaction of the forest. So if we really want to expedite any forest clearance, the forest department can identify land and keep it ready. So that will actually, that's what I think you are trying
That
to.
is exactly. So creating land banks. And land banks could be used for industrial purposes.
Yeah, you are so right. So for example, somebody wants to set up an industrial project, the government should develop industrial estates,
Yeah.
where you can just go and you just take the land which is required, and it should be an area which should be away from the city. No civil development should be allowed in and around the industrial estate, because in my experience what I have seen is that industrial estates are developed and then the population goes and settles in and around, because there is a lot of economy around that. And then they start complaining that there is inconvenience, there is issue of night transportation, there is noise pollution. So obviously when there is an industry, there will be sub-movement, and especially when you are thinking of manufacturing like steel or cement or any mineral, aluminium, that requires huge quantum of minerals, raw materials coming in and dispatch of finished products. You need a railway line, you need entry of hundreds and thousands of trucks. So I think what you are basically trying to say is that government should identify such industrial estates, plug and play model. You come, you set up, and it will be easier for the Ministry of Environment and Forest also to grant clearances, because it is already identified as an industrial estate.
So, so in this kind of a sense, setting up industrial corridors for A, B, C category,
Wonderful.
that would definitely help industries move their assets faster in the country at that point of time.
So I believe there is something which is planned around the Delhi-Mumbai,
Yes, the
corridor.
Yes, sir.
No, I think, see, the government has done this freight corridor, which is, in my view, a wonderful project. Because currently, sir, just to share with you and share with the entire audience, for any manufacturing setup, say for large scale manufacturing, I'm talking about mineral based industry or cement, to get a railway rack for dispatching your goods is a nightmare. One person has to regularly go and liaise with the railway department to get a rake. Once you get a rake, that movement of the rake itself is a problem, because we have the same track on which the passenger train travels and also the goods. So obviously passenger train will be given a priority and the goods train will be always put on the loop waiting for its turn to move. So I think, if we really want to be the fifth largest and third largest and maybe the number one, lot of infra projects is required, and I think government has taken a very right initiative in terms of putting up a freight corridor. You
Just
can
to add on
connectivity.
2 points to supplement to what Ankit has said and you also suggested, land bank should be developed by the government before auction. So why this is required? To avoid the delay after auction. Now exactly. So
Government
after
from private
absolutely.
party is a challenge.
So now after auction, why delay in the land acquisitions? Because of the litigations. If you see, public project acquisition is even today allowed. It's not that public project acquisition today is also happening to public model office only. Yes. That's a government acquisition route only. But problem is delay in the land acquisition, whether it's a private acquisitions through company or in a situation which we are talking about, that pre-acquisition before auction. But the root cause problem is not only who acquires the land and keep it ready. The root cause problem is that after acquisition of the land, whether it's government acquisitions or the private acquisitions or public project acquisitions, how much time you should give to the landowner to raise a dispute in a court of law. After 5 years, suddenly some son and grandson comes and say that, oh, this is my land, government has compulsorily acquired, and matter goes to court of law. It takes 5 years. So I think apart from the land bank, some protocol, some guidelines, some policies required that are how much time you require to give to the litigants to come to the court and dispute. Otherwise, what will happen, even a government acquires the land, that time also litigation will go, and government will never able to get the land bank. So the root cause is that have some discipline and some ethics in litigations policy, how much time you are, because today biggest problem in India today is land acquisition is not government acquisition land or that. Problem is that nuisance value in the land acquisitions by landowners. After selling the land, they are objecting in the name of third party, my rights, his right. I have seen husband and wife are fighting in a court of law against each other for the land. That's a cartel actually. We have seen that in the village lands, what's happening. So that solution is required, some litigation policy, some rights, sustainability. Then I agree with both of you that land bank by government will really help. If time is going to save. If time is not going to save by government or me, then we are same here there as it was.
I will give only one example. When a famous automobile company had a problem in West Bengal, one of the state government immediately came. So if the government wants, if they have the will, they can do it. And I think the land was allotted within, I think, in a week's time. It was record. Wonderful. So Ankit, you can continue with your thoughts.
Right. So, as I pointed out, land is one of the critical issues. So, first point was cost of borrowing. Second is the land. Now, the third one is regulatory this dichotomy between a central. Okay, so this is one important aspect. See, industry creates employment which is utilized or which is advertised by the state government. The central government is only policy maker in this case. But what is happening right now, there's a lot of dichotomy which happens between the state law and the central law. With incoming of GST, incentivization policy, which the state government would have generally offered to large players, is getting distributed. They're not too sure how this incentive policy is going to work out. So they advertise, that government goes, the new government comes in, they do not honor the policy.
Some other government, same government. You have cases where the same government is not giving because they don't have money to pay salary. How can they pay you fiscal incentive?
So this kind of a dichotomy between how a central, there are incentive schemes made in India. Okay, good, very well established. When it comes down, India doesn't manufacture. It's the state government which is going to give all the approvals for manufacturing. Land is still a safe supply. Then in that problem area, incentivization and policy comes into perspective. The policies are often drafted by administrators who have knowledge about how the business operates, but not taking input from the industry. Then industry's version of incentivization versus the state version of incentivization are way two different things. Against these two, a problem area. So that is one area which probably we should allow the Department of Industries to have a streamlined formula approach in A, B, C kind of industries across India. So that would take care of a lot of challenges when it comes down to setting up for industry, giving employment to a new sector, ensuring that the people get not only employment but also have a sustainable livelihood across India, not only pockets. So what is happening right now is pockets. That pocket can be diversified with such better policies. Now, this was the third point. Now, in terms of the fourth point, sir, is quality control. Now, this quality is something which normally is adhered to, like, for me personally, my personal experience, Japan is the benchmark for quality. Being such a small state, but still being able to manufacture, design, deliver quality absolutely 100% each time. In India, till the time the quality and not quantity may come up in later time, but quality is standardized, is absolutely controlled without any ifs, buts on provisos. BIS is given more teeth. Something like BIS is or is established to match with international quality standards. That is when India will pick up on manufacturing. Now, this is again a regulatory framework. Legal methodology is a good step. I certainly believe that legal methodology can also further be enhanced to match global standards. European Union has great standards in terms of most of the manufacturing, not only ESG perspective, but also from a quality control perspective. Those quality parameters, when brought into India in a regulatory framework, may make these things help forward on a very large extent, sir. So these are the 4 points which I'd like to sum up with this thing.
Okay, moving on, I think there is a big segment of laws, which is the labor law, the industrial laws, whether it is the Industrial Dispute Act or the Payment of Wages Act or the Factories Act. I think the list is long. As Kanhaiya was telling, the government has taken a very good initiative of codifying all these laws into broad areas. One is the Code of Wages, which converges the payment of wages and minimum wages and equal remuneration and stuff like that. And then the other is your Factories Act, and which is now codified as the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Condition. The third one is the Code on Social Security, which merges the ESI, PF, and this Building and Other Construction Workers Act, stuff like that. And the fourth is the Industrial Relations Code. So, Government of India did a wonderful job of making this code, but unfortunately this code has not seen the light of the day. So your thoughts on that, whether it is going to improve in terms of ease of doing business, because there are a lot of positive changes around that, and doing away with, I think that we must compliment this government for removing a lot of redundant laws and trying to bring in code which is in sync with the need or of the industry or the need of the hour. So your thoughts around that?
Sir, I truly compliment the government, existing government, in coming up with so large thought process in consolidating these acts. It's actually a draconian law, where employer, management level people were often threatened with imprisonment for things as, let's say, administrative in nature. Even administrative laws were getting things and challenged. Fear of compliance should not be there. Of course, a person should be allowed to be compliant. Self-regulation is the key. These codes are going to be wonderful instruments as and when implemented. Now, the challenge here is again the dichotomy between the state law and the central law. Some states are proposing it, some states are not proposing it. Perhaps with
I think the lack of rules by the state
yes,
governments
yes.
is what is holding on to the code,
So-
which came back almost 4 years, almost 4 to 5 years ago.
So almost every year we are hopeful that this will be implemented. Effective date will be made now. We do a back-end discovery also. You amend your processes also accordingly, but then it is not getting affected. I think the N2 has gone. By this time, N2 has gone. So we are still following the whole thing. We'll wait for the law to be made effective. I'm sure whenever it gets effective, they'll give us at least 6 months to 8 months or 10 months to implement the law. So at that point, I probably will again.
One strong message which I am getting from you and also from Kanaya is that a larger cooperation between the central and state government is required if we really want to become the global manufacturing hub, because central can make the act when it comes to implementation in terms of rules. Respective state government, because we have a federal structure, respective state government also need to chip in and make the rules and to attract investment. Just holding global investor summits and doing the photo op will not do. I think lot more action is required, and I think that is indicative of the fact is that many state governments which were lacking, and I'll take the example of UP, Uttar Pradesh, which was lacking in terms of investment, today is attracting the highest investment because of the initiative taken by the current state government. And states which were on the forefront, I don't want to name because I don't want to sound political, they are lagging behind. I think it is all because of the policies pursued by the respective state government, and I think if as a country we have to win, I
all
think
the states have
state
to come
and central
forward.
coordination is really, really required.
Absolutely. Sir. In fact, the states should compete with each other to get better policies.
Apart
to get
from
the
state
investment.
and central, Rajiv, I fundamentally believe that when we make any law as a lawmaker, if we invite more and more consultation from judiciary only, ex-retired judges or councils or legal community while drafting the law, and not leaving any lacuna or interpretation issue more and more in law, then I think litigations can be reduced, timeline can be reduced, so law should be very clear and enforceable, and judiciary reforms for a speedy and quality outcome and result. And then, as you rightly mentioned, state and central coordinations for the state legislations and union legislations. Then I think we can invite more investment. We can have a manufacturing hub like China, which is our dream. And then I think as an investor, whether it is a domestic investor or foreign investors, I would like to invest in a country where consistency in law, consistency in the judiciary system is there. And then I think within a 10 minutes also we can have an outcome of the court order also, Prasannaji, if you have the clear law. Okay.
So I think given the limited time, I think we have touched upon some of the subject, and I think one of the issue which is coming very, very strongly is that land is a major issue for the manufacturing to grow, and the recommendation is that there should be land banks and identified industrial estates and industrial corridors, identified corridors, where industries, if they want to put up new project or they want to expand, they can get clearances faster and quicker, less of judicial intervention, more certainty in terms of law, whether it is taxation, whether it is land, whether it is environment clearance, whether it is licensing, right? And a good example is the 2G example, where a lot of MNCs came and invested, and then the highest court of the country says that the spectrum allotment is illegal or is not proper. Now, when the guy invested, he was not aware, because if the government of India issues a spectrum, it is government of India. So rather than cancelling in retrospect the spectrum, you could have asked them to pay a higher price. If you felt that the right price was, and those who offered could have continued, and those who thought that it doesn't make business sense could have exited. It's just a thought. And in terms of cost of borrowings, I think So on that, Ankit, I think if this is, now the whole world is available for access to global funds, and I think good companies can draw and can draw money from there, whether it is bonds or ADRs. But I think I take your point, and the interest rate has shown considerable reduction, and I think with this inflation little bit around control, I think we can again see a reduction in in funds. But I think availability of funds is not an issue today for the right project. But I take your point that if you plan a project with, say, a 3-year horizon, that I will start commercial production in 2 years, and within 1 year I will achieve 100% capacity utilization, and that is where I will start generating cash to repay the debt which I have taken, or repay the returns to the equity holders. So if it is stalled because of XY reason, the entire arithmetic goes, and that is where investment becomes less attractive. So I take that point, and I think in the interest of time, I will stop here, and we are happy to take any questions from the audience.
The ideal scenario would, just one point, the ideal scenario would have been when the states participated in an auction to get a manufacturer in their states. Mm-hmm. That would have been an ideal scenario for getting in, attracting manufacturing.
Okay, okay. Yes.
I mean, one of the things while I do a lot of... Hi, I'm Abhishek Avasthi. I'm from AZPN Partners. See, one of the things, it's not a question basically, it's a suggestion which I always feel that, government should take into account is to have separate land tribunals for manufacturing industry. Because manufacturers will always, they concentrate on their business of manufacturing. They have nothing to do with the land. They're not equipped to, to understand the land, how it will work. So there has to be a separate land tribunal for manufacturing sector, which tribunal should be in each state, or it can be a central tribunal, which can coordinate and resolve these issues of manufacturing industries in terms of the land. Because I've been seeing that, there's a factory that has been built, and there's a small parcel of land, somebody is coming and saying that it was my land, you have not given me, you have encroached upon that. So those kind of issue, I think, should be done by a land tribunal.
No, absolutely, it's a very good suggestion, but I think we have enough tribunals.
Yeah.
I think the solution will be that government has all the records, and there can be title dispute within the family relating to inheritance and succession. The bigger problem, Abhishek, is that I have seen in my career that we get an industrial land, we put up the plant, and then the irrigation department comes and says that there is a nalla which used to flow, and hence you have violated, I will, close the factory. How do we deal with that situation?
Absolutely.
Because if a state industrial corporation is giving me the land, I assume that if there is a nalla, they have diverted the nalla. Or maybe a seasonal river which is flowing, where in last maybe 10 years no water has flown, but in the irrigation records there is a stream or a nalla, and because of that you have built the factory, so your factory should be demolished. So we have seen that also. So
I think two recent examples. One is in Gurgaon. What has happened is there is a residential sector which is going there, and there was a dispute that was for 10 years that was going with the irrigation department. People have now constructed their house. Developer has given the land to the residents. Now there is an order of a high court saying that no, there was a nala which is going on and it belongs to the irrigation department. Now they have come up and started putting poles there that this is our land, and the houses are constructed on that. Number one. Number two,
I'm not surprised. Actually, this will also reduce the litigation. Yeah. Because if we are more certain in terms of what we are getting, there will be lesser disputes. If there is lesser dispute, less burden on the court, which is already overburdened.
Correct. And I'll also like to mention that this new report that has been given by Amitabh Kant on the stressed real estate asset, they have made a recommendation that government should stop the litigation. They should not keep going again and again to courts and keep appealing. There has to be some stop. Because of these litigations, this is like, perpetual. It will never stop. There's a litigation which was going for 1995, and now we are sitting in 2023, and the court has given order. So those things need to be, stopped now by the government also.
That's fair. Yeah. Thank you. You have a question? Yeah, this lady has a question.
Hi, good evening. My name is Surbhi. I'm from Maruti. There is this basic question that when we were talking about delays in manufacturing setups, one possible solution is that there should be a single window mechanism for all approvals. Over the years, being part of Maruti, we have seen that government does commit that we'll provide a single window for you to set up agency, not in case of Maruti, but in case of many other manufacturing and bigger projects. But because it takes 2 to 3 years even to grab the land for that kind of project, this single window system gets diluted somewhere, and you're running from pillar to post for even a small approval to use the land, to buy it out from the farmer. Then again, like you are saying, if there is a nala, then changing it to diverting the nala, request to government, forest land, etc., etc. So what are your insights? Why it happens that government does commit to single window agency for big manufacturing units, but later on there is delay or failure on their part to implement such kind of solution. They do agree to provide a single window, be it Haryana, be it Kolkata, be it Rajasthan, at many places, but when it comes to implementation, that is not implemented, and hence one of the reasons for delays is too many approvals are required. So I think somewhere something needs to be done on that account. Any insights on that from panelists?
Yeah. Yeah, this is very unique and common concern across corporate that enforceability, implementation, efficiency, and single window or syncing various approvals in one place. It's a very ideal situation, and sometimes it's a must situation for your economic growth. But sometimes we have to be a very balanced approach that as a government, they have to run the entire country. Let us give some fair point to other side as well. Because in a platform, when we talk about, we always try to pinpoint the government regulatories. But sometimes we have to think from other side table as well. And when I'm thinking that, see, it's a democratic country today. Suppose, for example, it's your land, and your land has been grabbed unethically, illegally by the nodal officers, government officers, without your consent, or some illegality, some manipulations, because it's a public project. How, as an individual citizen of country, you feel? So your fundamental rights of litigation should be intact. At the same time, timeline, speedy. That's why I mentioned in my previous speech that every citizen has the right to litigations, but that right should be the balance, fairness, and some timeline. You cannot suddenly after 5 years, one day morning, you come, this is my right. So timeline. So this situation, I would say that if I ask question, I think I was about to mention Prasannaji, just during when he was the legal head of Aditya Group, and when he was veteran, when he's even today also a veteran, situation that point of time about manufacturing investment, land acquisition, single window clearances, EC, FC, all the subject we talked about. Do you think that it's really improved or improving? We are in the right direction to reforms of manufacturing? I believe yes, because I witnessed your time also and I'm presently also. So things are improving. Today, as a young lawyer, I ask very valid questions and we respect that. But if you ask 20 years before somebody, some government officers or legal person like me, when we start our career, things are slowly moving, very, very slow moving. Today, at least you have this ideal situation. So I would say that yes, we are improving. Government is doing their level best. But sometimes being a democratic country, they have to think about whether it is labor law or land reforms, how these regimes and amendments is popular or unpopular from political angle. So ultimately, they have to run the country. They have to win elections. So it has to balance in all regards. As a corporate seeker, I always my wish list, but then they have their own approach and timeline. Having said that, I would say that present government is really moving towards the reforms within the four corners of the political agenda or popularity they are doing some unpopular things also for the country and for economic development. So yes, so judiciary, land reforms, regulatory reforms, timeline efficacy is improving, but I would say half a glass, either it is empty or full, the way we look at it. That's the situation.
Thank you. On that very encouraging note, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for this panel.